Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my top 3 picks in terms of butchers, or basically where I source my meat on a carnivore diet. This topic was actually suggested by one of my viewers. Thank you so much, because I never would have thought of making a video like this. I actually didn't know that people will be interested to know where I get my meat from, but seeing that you never know, carnivore is going to be on the rise. More and more people are wanting to try, eating more animal based, towards the right approach of keto, where you incorporate more meat. Higher protein is of importance. People will start to be more aware and curious to know where to get quality meat, and of course not bursting their budget. And I thought that with me sharing with you my experience, what I've tried and my top picks is going to give you somewhat of a guide in terms of shopping for meat. Now, I don't know many carnivores in Singapore, but I do know quite a few in Malaysia. They are pretty smart in terms of where they source their meat. I will also share a little bit at the end where I get my meat sources when I go back to Malaysia. I think even if you are not where I'm from, where I'm right now in Singapore, or if you're not in Malaysia, I think this video will still be of use to you, because I'll be sharing with you why I pick certain cuts of meat in terms of not just the taste but the price. I think that kind of tip will also help you in terms of where you are going to be sourcing your meat from other places. Alright, so I've shortlisted 3. It was quite hard, but these are really my top 3 picks, and I picked it based on taste, price, and the service. I think these 3 things are key elements for me. So let's begin. So if you want to check out the butchers that I've mentioned, I will link their website down in the description box below. So let's go into number 1, which is Mr. Farmer. So Mr. Farmer is quite new, relatively new. I just found out about them probably like earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken, losing track of time. They opened up their shop very near to where I live in Singapore, and it's literally like walking distance, right? So Mr. Farmer, it's local, and it's all about sustainable products, organic and ethical local produce. They are popular for their French poulet, which is the chicken, but I was surprised to see that they have grass-fed meat, which is grass-fed beef from Silver Fern Farms. And if you check out their website, they will explain to you, where they get their sourcing. If you're all about sustainability and, ethical produce, this Mr. Farmer, it's definitely suitable for you. I trust their meat quality because, there is no antibiotics and growth hormones, which is what you don't want when it comes to your meat selection. And this often is what you will get in supermarket, and which is why I don't really shop in supermarket when it comes to meat. You will see on their website, it's very clean. I find it very simple, and there's actually not much to it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I would say that their chicken selection is definitely a lot more. But when it comes to beef, luckily for me, I am also not so adventurous. I always go back and forth between my ground beef and strip loin, which is my preferred cut of meat. So luckily they have the strip loin, which is what I get almost every day. Every time they see me, they know that I'm looking for strip loin, and whenever their strip loin runs out, they would kind of always notify me that when it's coming in. So that's how you know that my favorite cut of meat is actually strip loin, and they have the best tasting strip loin in my opinion. To be honest, I still don't know what's the difference between strip loin and sirloin. It's very similar to me. It's just there is this thick fat cap on the side of the steak, and that's what I prefer. I don't really like very marbled steak. I kind of like there's a side that is leaner, and then the chunk of fats is there. I get to control it in that sense. So yeah, their strip loin is really by far the best, because you know, some grass-fed meat can be very gamey, right? But this, I would say, is a very good in between. There is still a little bit of that, you know, bloody beefy taste, but it's very fresh and it's mild. And I would say that the fat that is around the strip loin is so heavenly, like it's so buttery. There's this like butterscotch kind of flavor, which is very hard to explain. But if you haven't tried grass-fed meat, you should definitely, for sure. I think they have the best tasting strip loin by far, which is why I put them in number one in terms of taste. It is pretty consistent throughout, but I would say the only downside is that sometimes they are produced, you know, maybe the batch of strip loin that they get, maybe the cow is a lot leaner. As you know, grass-fed cows are a lot leaner. So sometimes it's kind of disappointing to see the fat cat being very, very trim, you know, like as if they trim off the fats. So whenever I get the very lean strip loin, I will need to end up buying from another butcher, you know, like the very fatty short ribs, or like, you know, pork fat. I need to always substitute with some other fats because the strip loin is a lot leaner. But it doesn't happen very often, but I would say that is something you need to take note of. You might wanna, if you ever order from them, you might want to drop them a note telling them that they're very responsive on WhatsApp. Even when you order online, you can actually indicate it and let them know that you prefer the fattier cut. They also have ribeyes, which I think is a lot leaner. It's very, very tender. So if you're someone that you don't really like the very heavy taste of fats, right, their ribeye is actually a very good choice. It's very light, it's very tender, it's not too marble. Grass-fed meat is a lot leaner, as I mentioned. Apart from that, I also get their chicken. I would say that their chicken is by far the best tasting as well. I think it's really, the chicken is well fed, high quality feed. So my cat loves the chicken as well. My cat can tell a difference between supermarket chicken and this particular chicken. And you will notice that this chicken from Mr. Farmer has this yellowish tint to it. I think it's really the omega-3 or the high quality feed that the chicken has been on. So chicken is a good choice. I always get the chicken thighs. I'm not a chicken breast girl. It's too lean for me. But sometimes I would just air fry it until it becomes very crispy, you know, with the skin. That's pretty good too. I would sometimes get their not pork belly. They'll get their pork loin chops when it has the fattier cut. One interesting thing about Mr. Farmer is that if you go to their physical store, you can actually order their pork belly roast, you know, where it has that crackling of the skin, the you know, the specialty that we always have during Chinese New Year, you know. Yeah, they make it really good. I don't know how to explain. It's not dry, it's not too crispy, it's crispy on the skin and it's very moist at the meat area. So I think they made one of the best, and they always accommodate to my crazy request of, can you not put anything but just salt on it and no oil. So yeah, Mr. Farmer, I would say it's my pick number one. In terms of price range, I would say that it's the most affordable that I know so far. For 500 grams, you know, of steak, it's about 26.50 in Sing dollars. So that is RM 80 Malaysian ringgit, like 80 ringgit. But if you go to Malaysia, if you go to their, you know, most of the steak houses, for a 250 grams or less, you know, steak in a restaurant, you know, considering that they're going to charge you service fee for cooking it for you, you're going to pay the same amount. But if you actually buy your own meat, you know, like from Mr. Farmer, is actually like half the price. So yeah, in Malaysia, I think it's even in Singapore, it's not worth to eat out if you're a carnivore. I think you can do it once a while, but you know, if you have a lot of disposable income, I'm sure you can do it. But for it to be cost effective, for carnivores, it's really best to buy a lot of frozen rolls, store it in the freezer, and that way you save a lot of money. So their price, I would say that the strip loin is really affordable. Like I said, 500 grams for $26. Yeah, if you go out in Singapore, you would pay 30-40 sing just for a piece of tiny ribeye steak. So for Mr. Farmer, 500 grams, depends how much you eat. I know some of us carnivore can eat the entire thing for the whole day. For the whole day, $26, I think it's pretty alright, you know. The service wise, they are super friendly people. I think it's family owned, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know, but they're very friendly and always, you know, open to suggestions, you know, and they kind of accommodate to some of my requests. So, and sometimes when I need, you know, when I was on stay home notice, I couldn't go downstairs to get the meat. They actually deliver it to my house, you know, door-to-door delivery, and even if it's not within their delivery schedule. So I appreciate them so much for this, and yeah, I'm definitely, you know, one of their, if I'm not mistaken, number one regular customer. So that's Mr. Farmer, and now let's move on to number two. I would say that number one and number two is very close. It's almost on par, and I'm sad to say though, but I still have to give you a ranking, right? So New Zealand Fresh is very, very close to my number one. I often, like I said, Mr. Farmer and New Zealand Fresh is something that I rotate, you know, on a weekly basis. So there are some things that, you know, Mr. Farmer has that New Zealand Fresh don't have, and, you know, vice versa. So for New Zealand Fresh, I think I first heard about it when I was Googling for 100% grass-fed meat. And one of their key selling point is that their beef are really 100% grass-fed. So you don't have to worry about, you know, 100% grass-fed, grass-finished. So the cow throughout its life is just feeding on pasture. It's feeding on grass. So if you're very particular about grass-fed meat, New Zealand Fresh is really a good choice. So another thing that I like about New Zealand Fresh is because they are really an all-rounder, one-stop shop, you know. The variety of beef, lamb, chicken, venison, turkey, seafood that you have is just, you know, it's a lot, right? There's a lot of variety. And apart from meat products, they also have a organic, plant-based, and fruit products. So yeah, you can basically get all your healthy groceries from them. Everything here that you need. You don't have to worry about the quality. I can only speak for the meat, but I would say that I have tried their blueberries. It's really good, really fresh, very much different from the ones that you get from supermarket, where sometimes it's a bit inconsistent. Like sometimes it's a little bit sourish and bitter. So yeah, New Zealand Fresh I would say that sometimes on a weekly basis it will go to my number one. Like I will sometimes really prefer Mr. Farmer, and sometimes I will gear very much towards New Zealand Fresh. And you know, the 100% grass-fed meat, it's because they also offer offal or organ meat. And as you know, I'm a fan of beef liver, and I'm very particular about where I get my beef liver. I have tried, you know, some of those from Huber Butchery, if I'm not mistaken. It's a bit bitter. So the beef liver that I got from New Zealand Fresh is always very consistent, you know. Is the color, you know, the red is very, very deep, and you know that, you know, it's grass-fed because there's that sweet, you know, fresh taste to it every time. So it's my number one beef liver supplier. I also get other organ meats from them, you know, like veal liver, lamb liver I've tried. bone marrow, whenever I make my bone broth. So I have ordered quite a lot from them. But let's talk about the meat. I have tried many different types. I've tried their ribeye on the bone, a sirloin, but I must say my go-to that I always order almost every month is their picanha roast, which is their rump roast. So this particular cut, picanha, is made famous by the Brazilian, but I love it because it's very similar to your strip loin. It has this fat cap around it, and the muscle meat is quite lean. There's no marbling, which is what I prefer. But I must say that it's kind of different from your strip loin kind of fat, because strip loin fat tastes a little bit, sometimes it's a bit chewy, but this picanha roast, the fat cap, it melts in your mouth, so it's very different mouthfeel. And I must say that I get very, very satisfied eating their picanha cut. So the picanha cut, it's my go-to and I highly recommend it. You should definitely try it out. This whole roast can really last me the entire week. So their ribeye, on the bone, sometimes goes on really good discount. I enjoy it too because the marbling itself, it's very satisfying especially when you're doing omet. And of course, for slow cooking, those that like their meat to be very tender, they like to slow cook it. I've ordered their brisket and their beef chicks before. These are tougher cuts, so you will need to cook it longer. I always throw it in my slow cooker and cook it for 8-12 hours overnight, and it's always super tender. It kind of falls off when you pick it up with the fork. It's sometimes I would do that if I have the mood for it, but most of the time I will order their picanha steak. And another favorite of mine is, this is something that I think a lot of the butchers out there don't have. Minced beef or ground beef is something very commercial. A lot of people are able to accept it because you can eat it as a patty. You can use it for many things, ground beef. But they have this special Wagyu minced beef, Wagyu ground beef. It has a very unique flavor to it, I would say, but it's not too fatty. It's actually only 5% fat, but it tastes really moist and not dry as those 90% lean ground beef that you get from supermarket. This premium Wagyu minced beef, it's really, I must say, if you haven't tried it and you want to have something different apart from your regular ground beef, this is a good choice, and I think you should definitely try it. Sometimes they go on discount as well, but I think this is like a treat, and you don't need to eat a lot of it because somehow I feel very satiated after I eat it, when I turn it into like a patty. So apart from beef products, I also ordered their wild-caught salmon, very high quality. The salmon color itself is super orange, and it's very fresh. It's very different from those farm-raised salmon that you get from the supermarket, where it's very fishy. It's wild-caught fish is really another topic on its own. So if you would like to try wild-caught salmon, they have very good quality ones. Now let's talk about price. New Zealand fresh is, I wouldn't say expensive, but sometimes if they don't have certain discount, some of the meat can be a little bit pricey. But for the quality, for the experience, I think it's worth it. If you want to do this but you're on a budget, New Zealand fresh might be a little bit expensive. I would say that comparing the prices with Mr. Farmer, you get 500 grams of strip loin is about $26. So if you try to get the same amount in New Zealand fresh, it is $36 in total. I have it written here somewhere. Yeah, so it's $10 more in New Zealand fresh if you were to get the same amount of 500 grams strip loin or sirloin from Mr. Farmer. So it is $10 more expensive, but you will not be disappointed with the quality. So that is something for you to consider. Sometimes I will still treat myself. So like, you know, when you get your salary, you want to I'm just going to be indulgent a little bit. I'm going to buy a very expensive cut of meat. So that's what I will do sometimes, because the experience of tasting very high quality meat is very different. And I would rather that I spend this amount of money than go out to a restaurant and pay way more than I should for them to cook me a piece of steak, and I have to actually worry if they will be using butter or like vegetable oil to cook my steak. So in terms of service, they are the best, I would say, really. The owner, if I'm not mistaken, is the owner himself is actually like a friend of mine now, and he always educates or tells me about, you know, about their farms and how their meat is produced, and he gives very good information. Their service is really the best, also because in terms of urgency, like for example, I need, you know, the meat in like, let's say within that day, they will try to get it done. And if I'm not mistaken, if you look at the website, they can actually deliver to you within 60 or 90 minutes. So yeah, and I have recommended this to a couple of my friends. They have ordered, you know, things like venison, you know, some of the roasts, you know, for big family dinners, and it's been great and they've been loving it so far. And yeah, so let's move on to my final pick. So the butcher now is renamed as the Aussie Butcher. So this is how their website looks like. I haven't been here for a while now, I must say, but I remember this was actually my very first butcher that I always go to when I first started out Carnivore, because I found out that they were selling a lot of beef trimming and lamb trimming. You know, when I first went to Carnivore, I was on a higher fat ratio, so they were so kind to sell me, you know, 2 to 3 kg of like beef fat trimming, lamb fat trimming for a very, very like cheap price. And yeah, I was good for months, but unfortunately, you know, it became unavailable because they wanted to use the animal fats for other products. So yeah, they have variety as well, a lot better than Mr. Farmer. If you are not like me, you know, where you can become quite boring and restrictive willingly, I'm okay eating the same thing over and over again every day. So that's why Mr. Farmer works very well for me. But if you're someone that is looking for variety, you want shabu shabu, you want you know, really different cuts of beef, you know, apart from your standard ribeye and strip loin, you should check out not just New Zealand Fresh, but the butcher. They also have variety. Whether or not they are 100% grass fed, I'm still not too sure at this point of time. What I know is New Zealand Fresh is 100% grass fed. The butcher, I know that some of their products are stated there as grass fed, but then again, if you're very particular whether it's grass fed, grass finish, you might need to ask them. So for their meat wise, the taste, it's a lot beefier for some reason, gamier for sure. Okay, what I like about the butcher, I remember now, is that I always go to them for their economic cut, you know, the beef chuck, which is super affordable. You know, their 500 grams is only like $20, a lot less than what I would pay for a 500 grams of strip loin in Mr. Farmer. The beef chuck is known to be like the economic cut.